I've spent my entire adult life studying planetary bodies, rocks, gravity, orbital decay, dead things. That's what the moon was supposed to be. Dead. I'm telling you this now because whatever happens next will not stay contained. Not to classified journals, not to internal briefings, not to the careful language we use to keep panic from spreading. So I'm recording this as a personal account. My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that the moon is not what we thought it was. I work as a senior researcher for an international lunar monitoring program. Our job was simple in theory: track seismic activity on the moon, microquakes, tidal stresses, thermal expansion, routine work, until 6 months ago when the moon started responding. At first, it was subtle, patterns that didn't quite fit existing models. Vibrations repeating at irregular intervals, not random, not cyclical, almost reactive. We blamed instrumentation error. We always do. But then came the internal resonance data. Deep beneath the lunar surface, far below the regolith and crust, we detected hollow zones, massive ones, not lava tubes, not voids caused by impacts. These cavities followed a curvature that mirrored the moon itself, like layers, shells. I remember the meeting where someone finally said it out loud. It looks organic. The room went quiet after that. No one laughed. No one argued. We all saw the same thing on the screen. The density readings weren't consistent with rock. They changed over time. Slowly, yes, but measurably, as if internal structures were adjusting, adapting. We escalated the findings to a restricted task force. Funding tripled overnight. New sensors were rushed into orbit. Old Apollo data was reanalyzed with modern tools. And that's when things started lining up in ways I can't explain away. The moon rang like a bell when it was struck. You've probably heard that fact before, brushed off as a curiosity. But bells ring because they're hollow, because vibrations travel through a structure designed to resonate. The moon didn't just ring, it responded. Every time we sent a directed energy pulse, radar, neutrino scans, gravitational mapping, the internal activity shifted, almost like it was turning toward us. That was the first time I felt something I hadn't felt in my career. Fear, not professional concern, not academic unease. Fear, because dead things don't react. Dead things don't adjust internal pressure. Dead things don't exhibit growth patterns. By month 4, the data was undeniable. The moon had an inner mass suspended within it, not fixed to the core. It drifted, slowly, like something floating in fluid. We argued over terminology: core anomaly, central mass irregularity, unknown structure. No one wanted to say the word. Egg. I didn't want to say it either. But late one night, alone in the lab, watching the simulation replay for the 100th time, I noticed something new. The inner mass had shifted closer to the surface. Not much, but enough. And then, for the first time ever, the moon emitted heat. Not reflected solar radiation, internal heat, a pulse, short, deliberate. That same night, I received an automated alert from our seismic array. Lunar microquakes had increased by 300%, centered around a single region, the far side, the side we never see, the side that never faces us. I remember thinking something that still makes my skin crawl. If it's an egg, then it's turning, and whatever is inside is waking up. After the heat pulse, everything changed. Not publicly, not immediately. But inside the program, there was a shift I'd never seen before. Access permissions tightened. Entire datasets vanished behind clearance walls. People I'd worked with for years suddenly rotated off the project without a goodbye. And then the language changed. We stopped saying anomaly. We stopped saying structure. The internal memos started using a new term, Subject L, as if naming it like a specimen would make it less real. 3 weeks after the heat event, we detected something else, a chemical signature, trace emissions bleeding through microscopic fractures in the lunar crust, impossible elements at first glance, compounds that shouldn't exist in a vacuum, let alone persist for billions of years. And they weren't radioactive, they were metabolic. That was the word that got the report locked down. Metabolic byproducts imply process. They imply consumption, conversion, waste. They imply life. I remember sitting across from Dr. Kessler during the emergency review, watching his hands shake as he scrolled through the readouts. "This isn't a planet," he said quietly. "This is containment." No one corrected him. We ran simulations nonstop after that, tens of thousands of models, every known biological structure scaled to planetary mass, eggs, spores, dormant organisms, self-contained biospheres. Nothing matched. Whatever was inside the moon wasn't just large. It was engineered. Layered membranes, shock-absorbing strata, radiation shielding thicker than anything we'd ever designed. The moon wasn't merely protecting something. It was built to survive a hostile universe. And then came the growth curves. At first, we thought the inner mass was expanding due to thermal fluctuation. Heat causes expansion, basic physics. But the growth wasn't uniform. It followed patterns, directional expansion, reinforcement along stress lines, thickening near points of weakness. It was strengthening itself. I started losing sleep around then, not because of stress, because of dreams, vivid ones, always the same sensation, pressure, like standing too close to something massive and alive, feeling it shift without seeing it. Around month 5, the moon's orbit changed. Barely. A fraction of a fraction. But enough to send alarms through every astronomical observatory on Earth. Officially, we blamed gravitational variance, solar interference, measurement drift. Unofficially, we knew better. The moon was adjusting its position, not falling, not drifting, aligning. With what? No one would say out loud. Then one morning, I arrived at the lab to find half the screens dark, blacked out by order of the Oversight Committee. A new directive scrolled across the remaining displays. Do not transmit active scans into Subject L. Passive observation only. Too late. We already had. and Subject L had responded. We detected rhythmic pulses inside the structure, not seismic, not thermal, electromagnetic, low frequency, long duration, almost like signaling. That was when I realized something else that made my blood run cold. The pulses weren't random. They were counting, intervals tightening, sequences repeating, like a heartbeat accelerating or a timer. I confronted my supervisor that night, demanded answers, demanded transparency. He didn't deny anything. He just looked exhausted. "It's not just an egg," he said. "It's a delivery system." That was the first time anyone acknowledged the implication we'd all been avoiding. Eggs don't exist without an environment to hatch into. And something on Earth was responding. Our magnetosphere had begun fluctuating in sync with the lunar pulses. Deep-sea sensors picked up unexplained pressure waves. Migratory animals changed routes. Birds flew at night toward the moon. Even human behavior shifted. Emergency rooms reported spikes in insomnia, panic attacks, shared hallucinations. People dreaming the same dreams. Dreams of something vast pressing against a shell, scratching, waiting. The final data packet I accessed before my clearance was revoked showed a projection I will never forget. Estimated time to structural breach, unknown. Estimated time to internal activation, sooner than expected. Estimated survivability if breach occurs, not calculated. That was when I decided to record this, because if the moon is an egg, then whatever is inside isn't meant for us to understand. And I don't think it's meant to come alone. The first visible change happened on a Tuesday. That detail sticks with me because Tuesdays were always quiet in the lab. No press briefings, no visiting officials, just data and silence. At 3:17 UTC, one of our passive optical arrays flagged a surface anomaly near the moon's far side, just beyond the South Pole Aitken Basin. At first glance, it looked like a shadow artifact, a trick of low-angle sunlight interacting with regolith. But the shadow moved, not fast, not dramatically. It retracted, as if something beneath the surface had shifted and the crust above it had relaxed. We zoomed in. High-resolution imagery showed a hairline fracture stretching for nearly 60 kilometers. Not a crack, a seam. Perfectly smooth edges. No debris plume, no ejecta. The moon doesn't crack like that. Geological fractures are violent, messy, chaotic. This was precise, deliberate. Within hours, similar seams appeared elsewhere, always in symmetry, always following stress lines we'd previously mapped as reinforcement zones, areas we'd assumed were structural supports. They weren't supports, they were hinges. That was the moment space agencies around the world quietly grounded every non-essential launch. Officially, it was a global review of orbital traffic safety. Unofficially, we were told to stop putting anything else near it, because Subject L had begun reacting to proximity. One probe, an old, decommissioned satellite drifting in a decaying orbit, passed within a newly calculated exclusion zone. Its instruments went dark for exactly 47 seconds. Then it resumed transmitting. But the data stream was corrupted. Every file time-stamped with the same repeating number sequence. No images, no telemetry, just one narrow band signal looping endlessly. We didn't broadcast it. We didn't need to. Several of us recognized the pattern immediately. It matched the pulse intervals we'd been detecting inside the moon. The moon wasn't just emitting signals. It was listening. And when it detected something close enough, it responded. The oversight committee finally stopped pretending this was theoretical. New briefings came daily, shorter, tighter, no questions allowed. We were told to focus on one thing only, predicting the moment of breach. That was impossible. The internal structure wasn't behaving like a solid under stress. It behaved like a living system approaching activation. Metabolic output increased. Internal heat redistributed toward specific regions. The pulses grew stronger, not louder, but denser. More information packed into less time. I started noticing something disturbing in the raw signal data. There were variations, subtle ones, like the pulses were modulating, encoding, and the modulation changed depending on what we were doing. When we ran passive scans, the pattern stabilized. When we ran simulations predicting breach scenarios, it shifted. When we discussed contingency plans involving nuclear intervention, and yes, those conversations happened, the pulses spiked. That's when the idea everyone feared finally surfaced. "It knows we're watching," someone said during a closed-door session. No one argued. The next week, civilian astronomers began reporting strange visual effects. Amateur telescopes picked up faint discolorations along the lunar surface, iridescent sheens that shouldn't exist in bare rock. Social media lit up with speculation, filters, hoaxes, conspiracies. We let them talk. What they didn't know was that the discoloration wasn't on the surface. It was coming from beneath it. Light scattering through translucent layers as something inside shifted closer to the shell, closer to us. Then came the sound. Not audible, not exactly. Sensitive instruments across the globe began detecting synchronized low-frequency vibrations. Too slow to hear, too deep to feel directly. But human bodies responded anyway. People reported pressure headaches, nausea, a sense of dread without cause. Animals reacted worse. Entire flocks of birds grounded themselves mid-migration. Whales beached in clusters along coastlines thousands of miles apart. Pets refused to sleep near windows. And always, the moon looked the same. Perfect. Unchanging. Except for the seams. They were widening now. Micrometers at a time, but accelerating. I reviewed the oldest archived lunar images that night, going back decades, looking for signs we might have missed. I found something buried in a scan from the 1970s. A pattern beneath the surface, faint, incomplete. A shape that wasn't fully formed yet. And suddenly, I understood. The moon hadn't been dormant for billions of years. It had been incubating, slowly, patiently, waiting for something to change, waiting for us. The announcement was never meant to happen. At least, not yet. There was a carefully planned timeline buried inside classified briefings. Soft disclosures, gradual language shifts, phrases like new lunar phenomena and unexpected structural variants. The kind of wording designed to keep people calm while buying time. That plan collapsed when the moon flinched. It happened during a routine passive scan. No probes, no transmissions, just observation. At 1942 UTC, the moon's luminosity dipped by less than 1%, barely noticeable to the naked eye, but every instrument we had registered it instantly. Then the pulses stopped. Complete silence. For the first time since we'd begun monitoring Subject L, there was nothing. No internal vibration, no electromagnetic modulation, no thermal fluctuation. Nothing. The room I was in went quiet in a way I'd never experienced before. Not tense, not fearful, empty. Someone whispered, "Did it die?" No one answered. 37 seconds later, the pulses resumed. But they were different, faster, irregular, no longer rhythmic. They overlapped, layered, as if multiple systems had activated at once. That was when the outer shell deformation began. Satellite footage showed entire regions of the lunar surface flexing inward, then outward again, not cracking, breathing, slow, massive movements that displaced regolith in smooth waves rather than violent eruptions. The moon was no longer a static object. It was responding internally, adapting. Within hours, government stopped pretending. A joint emergency broadcast went out under the guise of a planetary defense coordination briefing. It avoided certain words. No one said egg. No one said entity. But they did say this: the moon is undergoing a previously unknown internal transformation. While there is no immediate threat, long-term outcomes cannot be predicted. People didn't panic, not right away, but something changed. You could feel it. Observatories were overwhelmed with traffic. Amateur astronomers live-streamed the moon non-stop. Every shadow, every glint, analyzed and reanalyzed. And then the videos started appearing. People filming the moon from their backyards. Their phones catching things cameras weren't supposed to catch. Ripples. Subsurface movement, visible as faint distortions under the surface glow. And occasionally, just for a frame or two, something that looked like depth where there should have been none. As if the moon wasn't a sphere anymore, as if it was hollowing itself out. Internally, the discussions became darker. Evacuation scenarios were drafted, not of cities, but of orbit. Plans to decommission the International Space Station, to move satellites farther out, to clear near Earth space as if proximity itself posed a risk. Someone finally asked the question everyone had been avoiding. If it hatches, what happens to us? No one had a model for that. The mass calculations alone were catastrophic. Whatever was inside the moon wasn't replacing it. It was using it. If the shell failed, the redistribution of mass could destabilize Earth's tides overnight. Best case scenario, global flooding. Worst case, orbital decay, the moon drifting, Earth wobbling, climate collapse within months. And that was assuming the thing inside was inert, assuming it didn't move. The internal scans we ran that night showed something terrifying. The core had shifted closer to the surface, not randomly, toward Earth-facing regions, toward us. And the signal patterns, they weren't noise anymore. We ran them through linguistic models out of desperation more than logic. The results were inconclusive, but one pattern kept repeating, a compression sequence that mirrored biological growth cycles, late-stage, near-term activation. I went home that night and stood on my balcony staring up at the moon like everyone else. It looked the same, cold, distant, familiar. But I knew what was beneath it now. Something ancient, something patient, something that had waded through extinctions, ice ages, and the rise of intelligence, waiting for a moment when the creatures below finally learned enough to realize they were standing under an egg. And I knew, with a certainty that made my hands shake, that when it finally opened, it wouldn't be an accident. The first crack did not look like a crack. There was no explosion, no debris cloud, no cinematic fracture tearing across the surface. It was a shadow, a long curved absence of light that appeared near the moon's southern hemisphere, just beyond the terminator line. At first, analysts assumed it was a calibration error, a misalignment between satellites as the moon rotated. Then the shadow moved, not with rotation, against it. The surface around the anomaly didn't break apart. It peeled. Vast sections of regolith lifted in slow, deliberate arcs, folding inward as if drawn by something beneath them. The moon wasn't splitting open like a shell being shattered. It was opening itself. Every sensor we had spiked at once. Gravitational readings fluctuated violently. Earth's oceans began behaving erratically within minutes, tides arriving early, late, overlapping. Coastal monitoring stations lit up across the globe. And then the sound came. Not through air, through instruments. A low-frequency vibration that passed directly through the planet, detected simultaneously by seismic stations on every continent. It wasn't strong enough to cause earthquakes, but it was unmistakably intentional. A signal. The shell continued to retract, revealing what lay beneath. It wasn't organic in the way we understand life. There were no eyes, no limbs, no recognizable anatomy. What emerged was a structure, vast, layered, and impossibly complex. A lattice of dark, interwoven forms that pulsed faintly with internal light. It looked less like a creature and more like a mechanism grown over eons rather than built. And it was alive. As more of it became visible, our instruments struggled to interpret what they were seeing. The object inside the moon did not obey consistent geometry. Parts of it appeared closer and farther away simultaneously. Sections seemed to exist at slightly different angles to reality itself. Several researchers collapsed at their stations, overwhelmed by vertigo and nausea, just from watching the live feeds. Then the moon's internal signals changed again. They stopped oscillating. They synchronized. Across every channel, a single pattern emerged. Not a message, a handshake. Something inside the moon was attempting contact, not with our satellites, with Earth. The effect was immediate. People across the planet reported the same sensation within minutes. A pressure behind the eyes, a sudden intrusive awareness, like realizing you're being watched after believing you were alone. Animals reacted first. Birds abandoned the sky in massive, silent flocks. Marine life surfaced in panic. Entire ecosystems seemed to sense something fundamental had shifted. And then, images began appearing. Not transmitted, perceived. Shared hallucinations reported by people with no connection to one another. A vast darkness. A field of stars seen from below rather than above. And something immense drifting through it, trailing worlds behind it the way comets trail dust. We understood then. The moon was not an egg in the way we'd imagined. It was a nursery shell, a protective cradle constructed around a dormant entity as it crossed the galaxy. A cocoon designed to stabilize, shield, and feed something that could not survive exposure during its long migration. Earth was never the target. It was the incubator, the tides, the magnetic interactions, the slow siphoning of energy and mass over billions of years. We hadn't been orbiting the moon. We had been maintaining it. As the final sections of the lunar shell folded away, the entity unfurled further, revealing vast, layered structures that extended beyond the moon's original boundaries. Earth's gravity strained visibly in response. Orbit calculations failed. Satellites began drifting. And then the entity acknowledged us. Not with words, with recognition. A single, overwhelming understanding pressed into the collective human consciousness. You are not insignificant. You are simply early. The moon's remains broke apart completely, dissolving into streams of particulate matter that spiraled inward, absorbed seamlessly into the emerging structure. There was no explosion, no impact, just absence. Where the moon had once been, there was now something else. Something vast enough to eclipse stars. Earth's night sky would never be dark again. Governments fell silent, communications degraded, power grids destabilized as magnetic fields warped. And yet, the entity did not attack. It waited, hovering, observing, as if deciding whether the species that had unknowingly kept it alive deserved to remain. I'm recording this now because our models show we don't have much time before irreversible orbital collapse begins. Whether that collapse is a side effect or a choice, I don't know. But if anyone ever finds this record, understand this. We were never alone. We were never chosen. We were simply standing beneath something far older than fear. And it has finally finished waking up. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. If stories like this keep you awake at night, consider subscribing to Buried Awake. New stories arrive every week, and once you start noticing the patterns, it's hard to look away.